A father took his young daughter on a fishing trip and never returned. But then, a hunter stumbled upon their abandoned camera, and what it revealed was more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. The morning sun filtered through cypress trees as Emily Whittaker guided her Honda SUV down a narrow road winding through the Florida Everglades. Dew still clung to the sawgrass, glistening like diamonds in the early light. She rolled down her window, letting in the distinctive aroma of the wetlands, earthy, primal, and alive with hidden creatures. Her knuckles whitened slightly on the steering wheel as she approached the small wooden dock where her husband and daughter waited. Mark stood on the weathered planks, methodically loading tackle boxes and fishing gear into their 16-foot aluminum motorboat. His movements were precise but tense, his shoulders rigid beneath his plaid flannel shirt. His dark beard framed his face as he worked, a cap shading his eyes. Emily could still hear the echo of their argument from that morning. Bills piling up, their savings dwindling since his layoff from the accounting firm 6 months ago. "What's the point of a business degree?" he had snapped, "when the economy tanks and they cut the newest hires first." The memory made her stomach tighten as she parked the car. Their 10-year-old daughter Lily bounced excitedly on the dock, seemingly immune to the tension between her parents. Her hair caught the morning light, her bright blue life jacket securely fastened over her t-shirt, and her shorts already smudged with dirt from kneeling to examine something in the shallow water. Emily watched as Lily pointed enthusiastically toward a tall blue heron standing motionless among the reeds, its reflection perfect in the still water. "Mom, did you see it?" Lily called as Emily approached, her voice carrying across the water and sending the heron gliding silently away. "That's a good sign. Mr. Peterson at school says when you see a blue heron before fishing, it means you'll catch something big." Emily smiled, momentarily forgetting the mortgage notice with its bold red lettering that had arrived yesterday. "Is that so? Well, we better make room in the freezer then." Mark clicked shut the plastic tackle box, checking its contents one final time. "We've got everything," he said without looking up. "Should be back around sunset." His voice was flat, professional, the same tone he'd used with her all week. "Look at my vest, Mom." Lily turned, showing off her bright blue life jacket. "Dad says I'm the safest fisher on the lake." "Smart thinking," Emily laughed, reaching out to adjust Lily's cap. The wooden dock creaked beneath them, the familiar sound mingling with distant bird calls and the gentle lapping of water against the shore. A light breeze carried the scent of muddy water and vegetation, the true perfume of the Everglades that no bottle could ever capture. Emily suddenly felt an urge to preserve this moment, to hold on to something tangible before they departed. She pulled her phone from her pocket, raising it to frame her husband and daughter against the backdrop of endless water and sky. "We have a camera with us," Mark said, gesturing to the vintage camera hanging from his neck. "We'll take plenty of pictures out on the water. No need for more now." "The Dresden?" Emily asked, eyeing the vintage camera they'd brought. It was Mark's pride and joy, an old Dresden body he'd had professionally modified with modern digital internals. He loved the classic aesthetics but appreciated the convenience of digital technology, especially for their outdoor adventures. "It's waterproof since the retrofit," he reminded her, "and I packed extra memory cards." "Just one," she insisted, motioning for them to pose. "I want one for myself." Mark reluctantly positioned himself behind Lily in the boat, his hands resting stiffly on her small shoulders. The contrast between them struck Emily as she captured the image, Lily's face split by an exuberant smile, eyes sparkling with anticipation, while Mark's expression appeared forced, his jaw visibly tense beneath his 3-day stubble. Emily slipped the phone back into her pocket, an inexplicable uneasiness settling in her chest. "Remember to be back before sunset," she reminded them. "The fishing zones close at dusk, and you know how spotty cell reception gets out in the marshes." Mark nodded dismissively as he turned the key in the ignition. The outboard motor sputtered briefly before roaring to life, the sound echoing across the water and startling a pair of egrets into flight. The smell of fuel mingled with the earthy scent of the wetlands as he adjusted the throttle. "We'll bring you back the biggest fish in the whole Everglades," Lily shouted over the engine noise, waving enthusiastically. Her bright blue life jacket provided a splash of color against the green backdrop of mangroves and the silver ripples trailing behind the boat, a reassuring sign of Mark's careful attention to safety. Her hair shimmered in the sunlight as they disappeared around the bend. Emily raised her hand in farewell, watching as they navigated away from the dock, the boat creating gentle waves that expanded outward like ripples in time. She stood there long after they disappeared around a bend, her hand still raised though they could no longer see her. The ambient sounds of the Everglades slowly replaced the fading motor, cicadas buzzing their summer song, birds calling to one another across the waters, and the gentle splash of something breaking the surface nearby. An unexpected heaviness settled in her chest as she finally turned to walk back to her car. It was just a day of fishing, she told herself. They'd be back by dinner, with Lily chattering excitedly about everything they'd seen. Yet something in the pit of her stomach, some primal maternal instinct, whispered that today would not unfold as planned. Emily returned home to their modest ranch-style house in a quiet Tampa suburb. The neighborhood was peaceful on this Saturday morning, with only the occasional sound of a lawnmower or children playing breaking the stillness. She pushed open the front door, immediately confronted by the stack of mail she'd left on the entryway table the previous evening. The kitchen clock read 11:43 a.m. as she spread the envelopes across the counter, sorting them into piles. Bills, advertisements, and a single birthday card for Lily from her grandmother. The bills formed the largest stack: mortgage, electricity, car payment, credit cards that had sustained them during Mark's unemployment. She opened the power bill first, wincing at the total. Florida summers meant constant air conditioning, and even their careful conservation hadn't prevented the three-digit figure that now stared back at her. Emily checked her phone, hoping for a text or photo from Mark, maybe Lily proudly holding up their first catch, but the screen showed no notifications. She tried to ignore the slight pang of disappointment. They were probably in a zone with no reception, focused on fishing rather than sending updates. The afternoon stretched before her like an empty canvas. Without Lily's constant chatter and questions, the house felt unnaturally quiet. Emily tried to focus on household tasks, folding laundry, wiping down countertops, organizing Lily's ever-expanding collection of school art projects, but found herself checking her phone every few minutes. By 5:30 p.m., Emily began preparing dinner, chopping vegetables for a salad to accompany the fish Mark and Lily might bring home. She set 3 plates on the table, arranged silverware precisely beside each one, and filled water glasses. The refrigerator hummed steadily as she opened it to retrieve ingredients, its normalcy a stark contrast to the growing unease she couldn't quite shake. Through the kitchen window, she noticed dark clouds gathering on the horizon. The weather forecast hadn't mentioned storms, but Florida summers were unpredictable. She glanced at the clock again. 6:15 p.m. They should be heading back by now if they wanted to make it before sunset. The sky darkened rapidly as a summer thunderstorm rolled in, rain beginning to patter against the windows in an irregular rhythm that quickly intensified to a steady downpour. Lightning flashed, momentarily illuminating the kitchen in harsh white light, followed seconds later by the low rumble of thunder. Emily's eyes darted to the clock again, 7:15 p.m. She picked up her phone and dialed Mark's number, listening to it ring until his voicemail picked up. "Hey, it's Mark. Leave a message." His voice, recorded on some forgotten ordinary day, sounded casual and relaxed, nothing like the tense man who had loaded fishing gear that morning. "Hey," Emily said, working to keep her voice light, "just wondering when you'll be home. Dinner's ready and there's quite a storm rolling through. Call me when you get this." She ended the call, trying to ignore the flutter of anxiety in her chest. The dinner, baked chicken instead of fish, sat on the stove, slowly cooling as the minutes ticked by. By 8:45 p.m., with still no sign of Mark and Lily, Emily paced the living room, her bare feet silent against the carpet. She had called Mark's phone repeatedly, but now each call went straight to voicemail. His battery had likely died. On-the-wall family photos seemed to watch her nervous movement. Mark teaching Lily to ride a bike without training wheels, her terrified but trusting expression captured forever. The 3 of them at Disney World last spring break. Before Mark's layoff, their smiles genuine and uncomplicated by financial stress. Lily as a toddler, asleep on Mark's chest, his protective arm curved around her tiny form. The storm had intensified, rain now hammering against the roof in angry bursts. Emily hugged herself, staring out at the darkened street where water coursed along the curb. Surely they had taken shelter somewhere. Mark was cautious on the water, especially with Lily, but doubt crept in with each passing minute. What if the boat had capsized? What if they were stranded on some remote island of cypress and mud, soaked and afraid in the darkness? At 9:30 p.m., her fingers trembling slightly, Emily called the park ranger station. The ranger who answered, a man named Jenkins with a deep, reassuring voice, explained that most fishermen had returned hours ago, especially with the storm rolling in. Sometimes folks have engine trouble or take shelter during bad weather, he added, clearly trying to sound optimistic. Your husband's an experienced boater, you said. Yes, Emily replied, though she wondered if yearly fishing trips qualified as experienced. But our daughter is only 10, and with this storm... I understand, ma'am. I'll check the dock personally and ask the late returners if they've seen them. What kind of boat are they in? Emily provided the details. 16-foot aluminum with a 40-horsepower outboard, Mark in his plaid flannel shirt and dark cap with his beard, Lily in a pink t-shirt with a bright blue life jacket. Then paced the kitchen while waiting for the ranger to call back. The refrigerator's hum seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet house, its normalcy a stark contrast to the churning in her stomach. The ranger called back at 10:15 p.m., his voice now carrying a note of concern that sent ice through Emily's veins. Mrs. Whittaker, I checked the dock and spoke with the last few boaters coming in. There's no sign of your husband's vessel, and no one remembers seeing them return. He paused. The storm has passed for the most part, which is good news. I suggest contacting the police to file a missing persons report. We'll begin a search at first light if they haven't returned by then. Emily thanked him mechanically, her mind already racing ahead to what she needed to do next. The moment she hung up, she dialed 911, her hands shaking so badly she missed dials twice. Rain dripped steadily from the eaves outside, marking time like a metronome as she waited for the operator to answer. Each drop seemed to whisper that something had gone terribly wrong out in the vast, indifferent Everglades. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice was calm and professional, a stark contrast to Emily's trembling one. My husband and daughter, Emily began, her words tumbling out faster than she could organize them. They went fishing in the Everglades this morning and they haven't come back. It's been over 12 hours, and the park ranger says their boat isn't at the dock and no one's seen them, and there was this big storm and... Ma'am, the operator interrupted gently, I need you to take a deep breath for me. Can you do that? Emily inhaled shakily, forcing herself to slow down. Yes, I'm sorry. That's good. Now I need you to give me your name and address. Emily Whittaker. We live at 1472 Palmetto Drive in Tampa. And who is missing, Emily? My husband, Mark Whittaker, and our daughter Lily. She's only 10. Emily's voice cracked on the last word. Emily described their boat, the dock where they'd launched, and their planned fishing route as best she could remember. Officers will be dispatched immediately, the operator assured her. Is there someone who can stay with you while you wait? Emily thought of calling her sister in Orlando, but shook her head despite being on the phone. No, I'm okay. I just need them to find Mark and Lily. After taking down Emily's contact information, the operator ended the call with a promise that officers would arrive soon. Emily sat at the kitchen table, staring at the 3 plates she'd set out hours ago, now collecting dust in the still air. Within 30 minutes, the crunch of tires on the driveway announced the arrival of 2 police officers. Through the front window, Emily watched them approach, a tall, heavy-set Hispanic man and a younger, athletic-looking woman. Both wore the dark blue uniforms of the Tampa Police Department, their badges catching the porch light as they rang the doorbell. Mrs. Whittaker, I'm Officer Rodriguez. This is Officer Martinez. The male officer introduced them as Emily opened the door. His voice carried a slight accent, his expression professional but kind. May we come in? Emily led them to the kitchen table, clearing away the untouched dinner plates to make room for their notepads. Officer Rodriguez sat across from her, while Martinez remained standing, her eyes scanning the family photos on the refrigerator. "We understand your husband and daughter didn't return from a fishing trip," Rodriguez began. "We'll need recent photos if you have them." Emily nodded, rising to collect framed pictures from around the house. She returned with a family portrait taken last Christmas, Lily's most recent school photo, and a clear shot of Mark from his company website before the layoff. As she placed them on the table, she noticed Rodriguez studying her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said carefully, "I need to ask you some difficult questions. Has your husband ever taken your daughter without permission before?" The question caught Emily off guard. "What? No, never." "Are there any custody issues between you? Any recent arguments that might have prompted him to leave?" Emily hesitated, remembering their heated exchange that morning about money, about Mark's inability to find work, about her suggestion that he take a job, any job, even if it was beneath his qualifications. The words had turned ugly, with Mark accusing her of thinking he was a failure, and Emily retorting that at least she was trying to keep them afloat while he went fishing instead of job hunting. "We've had some arguments," she admitted slowly. "Financial stress since he lost his job 6 months ago. But Mark would never—" She broke off, uncertain if that was entirely true. He had been different lately, withdrawn and quick to anger, spending long hours staring at his laptop or disappearing for drives alone. "Has he withdrawn any significant amounts of money recently?" Rodriguez pressed, his pen poised above his notepad. The question sent a chill through Emily. Just last week, she'd discovered a withdrawal of $4,200 from their already depleted savings account. When confronted, Mark had mumbled something about an investment opportunity, becoming defensive when she asked for details. "There was a withdrawal," she acknowledged, her mouth suddenly dry. "But I'm sure there's an explanation. Mark wouldn't just take Lily and leave. He wouldn't." The officers exchanged a glance that twisted Emily's stomach into knots. They asked more questions, about Mark's mood, about friends or family he might contact, about places he'd mentioned wanting to visit. Emily answered automatically, her mind racing with new, troubling possibilities she hadn't allowed herself to consider. After the officers left, promising to begin searching immediately and to put out a BOLOB on the lookout for Mark's vehicle parked at the dock, Emily stood in the center of her silent home, feeling as though the floor might crumble beneath her feet. Could Mark have planned this, taken Lily away to punish her after their fight? The thought seemed impossible. He adored Lily, had never used her as a pawn in their arguments, but the $4,200 nagged at her mind like a splinter she couldn't remove. Unable to sleep, Emily found herself in the garage at 2:14 a.m., pulling out maps of the Everglades from Mark's fishing supplies. She spread them across the kitchen table, the overhead light casting harsh shadows as she traced waterways with her finger. Mark had mentioned favorite fishing spots over the years. She marked them with a yellow highlighter, creating a constellation of possible locations. As she studied the maps, that troubling thought surfaced again. The withdrawn money, Mark's secretive behavior, his comment during their last big fight 3 weeks ago that sometimes he thought about starting over somewhere else. Emily pushed the suspicion away, guilt washing over her for even considering it. This was Mark, who had cried when Lily was born, who checked under her bed for monsters every night, who kept a folder of every drawing she'd ever given him. With determined movements, Emily began throwing essentials into a backpack: bottled water, energy bars, a first aid kit, bug spray, and a change of clothes for Lily. She knew the police and rangers would be conducting an official search at dawn, but she couldn't sit home waiting for news. If Mark and Lily were lost or stranded, every hour mattered. By 4:45 a.m., Emily had given up on sleep entirely. Her mind cycled restlessly between worry about accidents, the boat capsizing, Mark and Lily injured somewhere without help, and the unsettling suspicion that had taken root. She showered quickly, the hot water failing to wash away her anxiety, and changed into jeans and a light long-sleeved shirt for protection against the notorious Everglades mosquitoes. She pulled her dark hair into a tight ponytail, applied sunscreen despite the early hour, and checked her phone one final time for any missed calls. The screen remained stubbornly blank. Emily grabbed her packed bag and car keys, leaving a note on the kitchen counter with her cell number in case anyone came to the house looking for her. The door closed behind her with a decisive click as she stepped into the pre-dawn darkness, determined to find answers whether they came in the form of a rescue or a confrontation. Emily drove through the darkened streets, her headlights catching the mist hanging low over the road. The radio played softly in the background, a local station beginning its early morning broadcast. The announcer's voice was jarringly cheerful as he reported clear weather expected after last night's storm, perfect for weekend activities. Emily snapped it off, unable to bear the normalcy of the world when her own had tilted off its axis. She battled between hope and fear during the drive, her hands tight on the steering wheel. Hope that Mark and Lily were simply stranded with a broken motor, waiting for rescue as the sun rose. Fear that Mark had taken Lily deliberately, planning never to return to their life together. Both possibilities felt impossible, yet one of them had to be true. The eastern sky was beginning to lighten, a thin line of pale grey on the horizon, as Emily parked at the empty ranger station. The lot gradually filled with official vehicles, police cruisers, rangers' trucks, and volunteers' cars. Emily remained in her vehicle, watching the gathering search party through the windshield until she spotted Officer Rodriguez exiting a county sheriff's SUV. He looked surprised when she approached him, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Whitaker, I didn't expect to see you here this early." "I couldn't stay home," she said simply. "What's the plan?" Rodriguez studied her for a moment, perhaps assessing her stability, before explaining the search parameters. Teams would spread out along known waterways, focusing first on the areas Mark had mentioned as favorite fishing spots. Air support would join once there was enough light. Emily nodded, absorbing the information while scanning the assembling searchers, ready to do whatever necessary to find her family, whether they were lost or hiding. The first light of dawn painted the Everglades in soft gold, illuminating cypress trees and turning the still water into a perfect mirror. Emily stood on the same dock where she had last seen Mark and Lily, surrounded now by search and rescue personnel in neon yellow vests. The air hung thick with humidity after the night's storm, mosquitoes forming clouds around her ankles despite the repellent she'd applied. She swatted them away absently, her focus entirely on the two officers listening to her description of Mark's usual fishing route. "He normally starts here," Emily traced a path on the laminated map one officer held, "then works his way through these mangrove channels. He likes the spots where fresh water and salt water mix, says that's where the best fishing happens." Officer Rodriguez nodded, continuing to take notes as she spoke. His dark eyes were bloodshot from what was likely a very short night. "And your daughter, Lily, she was excited about the trip." "Very," Emily's voice softened, "especially about seeing alligators from a safe distance. Mark always brought binoculars so she could watch them without getting close." Rodriguez noted this, then hesitated before asking his next question. "Mrs. Whitaker, I need to revisit something we discussed last night, about problems at home." Emily stiffened, her fingers unconsciously twisting her wedding ring. The gold band felt suddenly foreign, as if it belonged to someone else's life. Around them, the search team prepared boats, checked radio equipment, and distributed water bottles for what would likely be a long, hot day of searching. "We've had financial difficulties since Mark's layoff," she admitted. "His company downsized last winter, and accounting jobs have been scarce. We've been living on my teacher's salary and dipping into savings." She hesitated, then added, "The arguments have gotten worse recently." What she kept to herself, what felt too much like betrayal to voice aloud, were the dark thoughts that had crept in during her sleepless night. The possibility that Mark hadn't gotten lost at all, that maybe after months of rejection letters and diminishing self-worth, after increasingly bitter arguments about money and responsibility, he'd made a decision. Their last fight had been explosive, ending with Mark muttering something about starting over somewhere else as he slammed the door. Officer Rodriguez seemed to read something in her expression. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said carefully, "is there anything else you think might be relevant? Anything at all?" Emily shook her head, not trusting her voice. Speaking her fears aloud felt like making them real, like accepting that the man she married could abandon his family rather than face their problems together. The search began at 7:15 a.m., with teams of officers and volunteers spreading out across different waterways. Small motorboats and airboats departed from the dock in a carefully orchestrated pattern, their wakes creating overlapping ripples across the previously still water. Emily was directed back to the ranger station as requested, where she marked Mark's favorite fishing spots on the search coordinator's maps with shaking hands. The first hour passed with no sightings, then the second. Emily sat in a folding chair at the command post, clutching a foam cup of bitter coffee long gone cold. The maps of the Everglades were spread across a plastic table, certain areas marked with red highlighter, where teams were currently searching. Outside the window, more volunteers arrived, launching additional boats as the search expanded. "We're doing everything possible," a female ranger assured her, squeezing Emily's shoulder briefly before returning to the radio, where updates from search teams crackled through static. "These first 24 hours are crucial." Emily nodded mechanically, her eyes fixed on the map. The Everglades sprawled before her in blue and green paper representation, over 1.5 million acres of wetlands, sawgrass marshes, and mangrove forests. A labyrinth where a boat could easily disappear, where a man and child could be lost without a trace, or where someone could deliberately vanish if they wanted to. By mid-morning, Emily's thoughts had turned increasingly dark. She remembered his words now with painful clarity. "You have no idea what it's like, do you? To feel completely worthless. To watch your wife support the family while you sit around sending resumes into the void. Maybe I should just disappear. Would that make it easier for you?" At the time, she dismissed it as frustrated hyperbole. Now those words echoed with potential intent. Officer Rodriguez approached, noticing something different in Emily's demeanor. A new tension, a furtive guilt in her eyes. He pulled up a chair beside her, away from the others coordinating the search. "Something's changed," he observed quietly. "You're thinking differently about this situation than you were last night. Why?" Emily stared at her hands, noticing a small cut on her thumb she didn't remember getting. "Just tired," she murmured. "Mrs. Whitaker," Rodriguez leaned forward, his voice low but insistent. "I've been doing this job for 17 years. I know when someone is holding something back. Whatever it is, it could help us find your husband and daughter." The dam broke. Emily's composure crumbled as she confessed her growing fear, no, her suspicion, that Mark had taken Lily deliberately. Between shaky breaths, she detailed his cryptic comments about starting over, the intensifying arguments, and his increasingly secretive behavior. "He's been so different these past few months," she finished, wiping at tears with the back of her hand. "Distant, angry, not the Mark I married. What if this whole fishing trip was just a cover? What if he never intended to come home?" Rodriguez's expression hardened, his earlier sympathy giving way to professional concern. "Why didn't you share this critical information earlier?" he asked, his tone sharper than before. "We could have issued an Amber Alert, notified Border Patrol, expanded our search parameters beyond the park." Emily broke down completely, shoulders shaking with sobs. "Because I couldn't bear the thought it might be true," she whispered, "that my husband would steal our daughter out of spite, that he'd rather disappear than work through our problems together." Rodriguez stood abruptly, signaling to the search coordinator. Within minutes, the atmosphere at the command post transformed. The search coordinator announced they were temporarily calling off the water search due to dangerous conditions in some channels, a transparent excuse that fooled no one, and the need to regroup with new information. They would restart in 2 hours with a different approach, including possible air support and an expanded perimeter. Emily sat alone at the table, staring at the map as the command post emptied around her. The reality of what she'd done, the accusations she'd made against her own husband, settled over her like a shroud. Just as Emily reached her lowest point, a commotion erupted near the entrance to the ranger station. Voices rose in urgent tones, drawing her attention from her grief. A man in hunting camouflage burst through the door, his boots leaving muddy prints on the linoleum floor. Sweat plastered his graying hair to his forehead, and his weathered face bore the deep tan of someone who spent most of his life outdoors. "I need whoever's in charge," he announced, his voice carrying across the now bustling command center. Officer Rodriguez intercepted him, holding up a hand to slow the man's urgent approach. "I'm Officer Rodriguez, one of the coordinators for this search. And you are?" "Travis Jenkins," the man replied, wiping sweat from his brow with a camouflage bandana. "Been tracking deer since before sunrise, way down in the south section. Found something you folks need to see." Emily approached slowly, catching fragments of their conversation. Jenkins spoke rapidly, his hands calloused and stained with what looked like mud, gesturing emphatically as he described finding something that don't belong out there, in a restricted area where he'd been tracking a 10-point buck before legal hunting hours. "Wasn't even supposed to be in that area," Jenkins admitted. "But this buck, I've been after him 3 seasons now, and I tracked him to this hidden channel." "What exactly did you find, Mr. Jenkins?" Rodriguez interrupted. Jenkins reached into his vest pocket and carefully placed an object wrapped in his bandana on the nearest table. Emily drew closer, her heart suddenly pounding against her ribs. As Jenkins unwrapped the muddy bundle, she recognized the distinctive vintage body of Mark's treasured Dresden camera, the hybrid digital camera he'd taken fishing with Lily. A gasp escaped her lips before she could stop it. "That's theirs," she confirmed, her hand flying to her mouth. "That's Mark's Dresden. He never went anywhere without it." Jenkins nodded grimly. "Figured it belonged to your missing folks when I heard the alert on my radio. Found it partially buried in mud near a hidden channel about 5 miles south of the main waterway." He leaned over the map, his grimy finger leaving a smudge as he pointed to an area marked in dark green. "Right about here. Nasty area, maze-like passages, lots of gators. Most recreational fishermen avoid it." Technical Officer Sarah Lynn, a petite woman with short black hair and intense focus, approached with latex gloves and an evidence bag. "We'll need to clean and examine this properly," she explained, carefully placing the mud-caked vintage camera inside. Despite the age of the body, the memory card appears intact, though the exterior is damaged. Emily watched, scarcely breathing, as Lynn carried the camera to a makeshift tech station set up under a canopy nearby. The morning air hung heavy with humidity, the sun barely visible through the haze as it rose over the tree line. Around her, the search operation transformed. Radio calls redirected teams toward the new area of interest, maps were marked with fresh coordinates, and the energy of the command center intensified with renewed purpose. Within an hour, Lynn waved Emily and Rodriguez over to her laptop. "I've recovered the files," she announced, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The memory card survived intact despite the mud and water damage to the camera itself. Emily pulled a chair close, her legs suddenly too weak to support her. The screen filled with thumbnail images, dozens of photos from yesterday's fishing trip. Lynn clicked on the first one, and Mark's smiling face appeared, clearly taken by Lily at the beginning of their journey. Emily's throat tightened at the sight of him looking relaxed and happy, nothing like the tense, frustrated man who had left the dock. Lynn continued scrolling through the images, Lily proudly holding a small base, a close-up of a turtle sunning itself on a log, beautiful shots of the Everglades landscape in golden morning light. Then she opened the video files, starting with the earliest one from 10:23 a.m. the previous day. The video began playing on Officer Lynn's laptop, the audio slightly muffled and uneven, a result of the Dresden's basic built-in microphone that had captured the sounds during recording. Despite the imperfect sound quality, Emily could clearly hear Lily giggling as Mark demonstrated proper casting technique. "That's it, Lil," his recorded voice encouraged. "Nice and easy, let the line do the work." The footage captured ordinary moments, Mark pointing out birds, Lily's excited whispers when they spotted an alligator from a safe distance, both of them eating sandwiches, while the boat drifted gently in a quiet lagoon. Lynn moved to the next video, time-stamped 1:47 p.m., showing them navigating through increasingly narrow channels. Emily noticed that Mark had mounted the Dresden camera securely to the side of the boat using a small, flexible tripod, positioning it to capture both of them as they explored. "Dad, where are we going?" Lily's voice asked as she looked directly at the camera. "There's supposed to be a great spot around here," Mark replied, studying a hand-drawn map someone had given him. "Guy at the bait shop said it's worth the extra time to get there." Emily felt a chill despite the morning heat. There was no tension in Mark's voice, no hidden agenda in his expressions. He looked like a father enjoying a day with his daughter, not a man planning to disappear with her. The next video, time-stamped 2:38 p.m., showed them even deeper in the maze of waterways, Mark looking slightly concerned as he checked their fuel gauge. "We'll have to head back soon, Lilypad," he said, using his pet name for her. "Don't want Mom to worry." Lynn opened the final video, time-stamped 3:42 p.m. It began with Mark navigating a particularly narrow channel they clearly hadn't explored before. The vegetation grew thick on either side, creating a tunnel-like effect as they eased the boat forward. Suddenly, Mark's voice dropped to a whisper. "Lily, get down and be quiet." The camera angle shifted downward but continued recording. Through the shaky footage, the bow of the boat came into view as it rounded a bend in the channel. In the background, Mark's breathing quickened. The camera angle lifted slightly and Emily gasped. A hidden dock came into view, crude but functional, where 3 men were unloading large packages from unmarked boats. The packages were wrapped in black plastic and handled with clear urgency. "Stay down," Mark whispered to Lily as he tried to reverse the boat quietly. The microphone picked up the subtle change in the motor's pitch as he shifted to reverse. For a moment it seemed they might slip away unnoticed. Then someone shouted in Spanish. The video became chaotic, violent movement as the boat jerked, voices yelling, the crack of what sounded like gunfire. Lily screamed, high and terrified. Mark's voice rose above the chaos. "Run, Lily, run!" The camera tumbled from its mount, falling into the murky water with the lens briefly capturing chaotic glimpses of sky and cypress branches for several seconds before the recording ended abruptly. The ranger station fell into stunned silence as the video finished. Emily sat frozen, her earlier suspicions about Mark evaporating like morning mist beneath the harsh sun of reality. He hadn't taken Lily and disappeared. They had stumbled upon something deadly, something they were never meant to see. Rodriguez immediately began issuing orders to his team, his voice tight with urgency. "I need these coordinates pinpointed exactly. Get tactical units ready. This is now potentially a hostage situation involving narcotics trafficking." The hunter who found the camera shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between the paused video and the floor. A volunteer who had been helping with the search, Carlos Mendez, a local fishing guide with deep knowledge of the Everglades, stared at the screen with widening eyes. Recognition flashed across his face, quickly masked by a careful blankness. "Does anyone recognize this location?" Rodriguez asked the assembled group. "Anyone familiar with this particular area?" Carlos stepped back slightly, his gaze fixed on the floor. "Need some air," he mumbled, turning toward the door. "Too crowded in here." Emily noticed his reaction, watching intently as he made his way outside. Something in his body language, the stiff shoulders, the averted gaze, triggered her intuition. While Rodriguez continued organizing the tactical response, Emily slipped outside after Carlos. She found him in the parking lot, unlocking an old Ford pickup truck covered in fishing decals and bumper stickers. "Wait," she called, rushing toward him. When he turned, she saw fear in his eyes, raw and unmistakable. "You know that place," she said. "Not a question, but a certainty. You recognized it." Carlos glanced around nervously before pulling her behind his vehicle, out of sight from the station windows. "Lady, you don't understand what you're asking," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "These people, they're not just drug runners, they kill anyone who crosses them." "My daughter is out there," Emily said, gripping his arm with desperate strength. My 10-year-old daughter. Please." Carlos ran a hand over his face, conflict evident in every line of his body. "They threatened my family last time," he finally admitted. "5 years ago I used to guide down there, had a route that went through an area locals call Devil's Throat. One day I took a client through, and we saw the same operation. They let us leave, but 2 men visited my home that night. They described my children's schools, my wife's daily routine. Said, if I ever returned to Devil's Throat or told anyone about what I saw, they'd kill my entire family." "Please," Emily whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I won't tell anyone you helped me, I swear it." After a long moment, Carlos sighed heavily. He pulled an old receipt from his pocket and sketched a crude map on the back with a stubby pencil. "This channel here, it looks like a dead end, but there's a hidden passage if you know where to look." His pencil traced a narrow route. "The water's deep enough for a boat, but you have to duck under fallen cypress. Devil's Throat opens up after about 100 yards. That's where they operate." He pressed the makeshift map into her hand. "If they find out I helped you, they'll kill me and my family, you understand? You can never mention my name." "I promise," Emily said, clutching the paper. "Thank you." She rushed back inside, finding Rodriguez marshalling his tactical team. Taking a deep breath, she approached him confidently. "I just remembered something," she announced. "Mark mentioned a special fishing spot he'd heard about from someone at the bait shop, a place called Devil's Throat. He said it was supposed to be a local secret with great fishing." Rodriguez's head snapped up, recognition flashing in his eyes. "Devil's Throat," he repeated, exchanging glances with another officer. "Are you certain that's what he called it?" Emily nodded firmly, maintaining eye contact despite her pounding heart. "Positive. Is it important?" "Devil's Throat is a notorious channel known to law enforcement," Rodriguez explained, lowering his voice. "We've had intelligence for years that it's used by the Ochoa cartel for moving product from the Gulf into the interior, but we've never been able to pinpoint its exact location. Every time we get close, they seem to have advance warning." Within minutes, the operation transformed from a search and rescue mission to a tactical response. Additional officers arrived, some in tactical gear with DEA emblazoned across their vests. Air support was requested, and Emily watched in both hope and terror as they mobilized with practiced efficiency. "You'll have to stay here, Mrs. Whitaker," Rodriguez told her firmly. "This is now a potential hostage situation involving armed narcotics traffickers. We can't risk civilian involvement." "That's my daughter out there," Emily replied, her voice steady despite her fear. "I'm coming with you." After a tense standoff, Rodriguez reluctantly agreed to let her accompany the command boat, but only if she remained on board with an officer at all times and followed every instruction without question. Emily agreed immediately, hope and dread mingling in her chest as she prepared to face whatever awaited them in the heart of the Everglades. The tactical response team loaded equipment into 3 airboats at a secondary launch point closer to Devil's Throat. Officers in tactical gear checked weapons and communication devices, their faces set in the grim determination of professionals preparing for a potentially dangerous encounter. Emily sat rigidly in the command boat beside Rodriguez and Officer Martinez, her fingers tracing the edges of Carlos's hand-drawn map in her pocket. Emily had been given a bulletproof vest that felt impossibly heavy across her shoulders, its weight a constant reminder of the danger they were heading toward. Martinez handed her a bottle of water and a wide-brimmed hat for sun protection, her expression professional but kind. "Stay low in the boat," Martinez instructed, checking Emily's vest one final time. "If there's any sign of trouble, you get on the floor immediately. Understood?" Emily nodded, her throat too dry for words despite the water she'd just consumed. The engines roared to life, drowning out Rodriguez's final instructions to his team. Through the noise, Emily caught fragments. Possible hostage situation, armed and dangerous, approach with extreme caution. The reality of what they were doing, pursuing armed drug traffickers who might have her husband and daughter, crystallized in that moment, sending ice through her veins despite the Florida heat. She felt the boat lurch forward, spray hitting her face as they accelerated into the maze of channels. The lead boat carried 4 tactical officers, their weapons visible and ready. Behind them came the command boat with Emily, Rodriguez, Martinez, and the boat operator. The third boat followed with additional tactical support and a medic, prepared for any eventuality. The journey took less than 30 minutes, the boat slowing as they approached the coordinates from Carlos's map. Rodriguez raised his hand, signaling for radio silence. The engines dropped to a low idle, the sudden relative quiet disorienting after the constant roar. The channel narrowed dramatically, cypress trees creating a dense canopy overhead that turned midday into twilight. Rodriguez pointed to an almost invisible tributary branching off to the right, a gap in the vegetation so narrow it appeared impassable. A fallen tree partially blocked the entrance, its weathered trunk creating a natural barrier. This, Emily realized, must be the entrance to Devil's Throat. "This is it," Rodriguez whispered, his voice barely audible. He signaled to the lead boat to proceed, watching intently as they maneuvered toward the hidden passage. The tactical team moved with practiced precision, their boat nosing into the gap with agonizing slowness to minimize both noise and wake. Emily strained to see past the tangles of roots and fallen vegetation, partially blocking the entrance. The lead boat slipped under the fallen tree, the officers ducking low to pass beneath the moss-draped trunk. They disappeared into the shadows beyond, swallowed by the dense foliage that made this place so perfect for illicit activities. Martinez leaned closer to Emily, her voice a barely audible whisper. "Devil's Throat is the perfect setup for smuggling operations," she explained. "Remote, difficult to access, and with multiple escape routes through these labyrinthine waterways, they probably move millions in product through here each month." Emily nodded, noticing for the first time how the vegetation around them showed signs of disturbance. Branches broken at unnatural angles, mud gouged with recent activity, subtle indicators of human presence in this otherwise pristine wilderness. Her eyes darted constantly, searching for any sign of Lily or Mark in the shadowy undergrowth. After what seemed an eternity but was likely only minutes, a soft click came over Rodriguez's radio, the signal to proceed. He nodded to their boat operator, who guided them carefully under the fallen tree and into Devil's Throat. The channel continued its narrow, winding path for about 100 yards, just as Carlos had described, before suddenly opening into a small lagoon. The sunlight returned here, filtering through breaks in the canopy to create dappled patterns on the dark water. On the far side stood the dock from the video, crude but functional, constructed of weathered planks supported by posts driven deep into the swamp bottom. But unlike in the video, the dock now stood deserted. No boats, no people, no sign of recent activity. Rodriguez surveyed the area through binoculars before speaking into his radio in a low voice. "Area appears vacant. Alpha team, secure the perimeter. Bravo, with me to check the structures." The lead boat approached the shoreline, while Rodriguez signaled their operator to hold position in the center of the lagoon. Emily was given strict instructions to remain in the command boat with Martinez and the operator, while the tactical team secured the area. Emily raised her own binoculars, scanning the shoreline desperately for any sign of Lily or Mark. The dock extended about 20 feet from the shore, ending in a small platform where the drug packages had been unloaded in the video. Behind it stood a dilapidated shed, its wood gray with age and exposure. Nearby, a crude path disappeared into the underbrush, likely leading to a land route for transportation once the drugs were brought ashore. Emily watched the tactical team move with practiced efficiency, weapons at the ready as they secured first the dock, then approached the small shed cautiously. As they approached, Emily could see the distinctive mound of newly turned soil, about 6 feet long and 2 feet wide. Her mind refused to process what her eyes were seeing, even as her body recognized the truth, ice spreading through her veins despite the sweltering heat. Rodriguez jumped from the boat into the shallow water, wading quickly to join Williams. Both men knelt beside the disturbed earth, examining something Emily couldn't see from her position. When Rodriguez looked back toward the boat, his expression confirmed her worst fears. Despite Martinez's attempt to restrain her with a firm hand on her arm, Emily lunged from the boat, her legs splashing into knee-deep water as she waded desperately toward the two officers, and what she now recognized with absolute certainty was a shallow grave. The mud sucked at Emily's feet as she stumbled forward, water soaking her jeans to the knees. She collapsed beside the shallow grave, her legs giving way beneath her as the full horror of the situation overwhelmed her. Rodriguez tried to pull her back, his strong hands gripping her shoulders, but she shoved him away with unexpected force. "Mrs. Whitaker, please," he urged, his voice gentle but firm. "This is an active crime scene. We need to preserve evidence." Emily barely heard him. The officers had uncovered enough of the hastily dug grave to reveal a portion of a body, a man's body. A plaid flannel shirt, torn and stained with dark brown patches of dried blood, was visible through the disturbed soil. The fabric, though caked with mud, was unmistakable, the same shirt Mark had worn in the video. Emily reached toward the partially exposed form, but Rodriguez caught her wrist, gently restraining her. "I understand," he said softly, "but we need to document everything properly. The forensics team is coming." Emily didn't struggle against his grip, her focus entirely on Mark's left hand, now visible where the officers had cleared away soil. His wedding ring, the simple gold band she'd placed on his finger 11 years ago, remained on his mud-caked finger. The reality of Mark's death hit her in waves, each one threatening to pull her under completely. Her husband was gone, murdered and buried in this forsaken corner of the Everglades for stumbling upon something he was never meant to see. Emily allowed Rodriguez to lead her to a fallen log nearby, where she sat shivering despite the humid heat. Officer Martinez approached with a bottle of water, but Emily couldn't bring herself to drink. Her throat had closed around a knot of grief that no amount of water could wash away. As the initial shock began to recede, thoughts of Lily surfaced through her grief like bubbles rising through dark water. If Mark was dead, where was Lily? Had they killed her too? Was her tiny body buried somewhere else in this vast, indifferent wilderness? The image of her daughter's bright pink t-shirt covered in mud and blood rose unbidden in her mind, bringing a fresh wave of panic that overwhelmed even her grief for Mark. Emily stood suddenly, startling Martinez, who had been keeping a watchful eye on her. "Lily," she gasped, her voice breaking. "We need to find Lily." "Mrs. Whitaker," Rodriguez approached her, his face grave. "My team is searching the entire area. If your daughter is here, we'll find her." "She's here," Emily insisted, a mother's intuition rising above rational thought. "I can feel it. Mark would have made sure she was hidden somewhere safe." Before the officers could stop her, Emily began calling for her daughter, her voice breaking with desperation as it echoed across the lagoon. "Lily, Lily, it's Mom. Where are you, baby?" Rodriguez stepped toward her, concern etched on his weathered face. "Mrs. Whitaker, please. If cartel members are still in the area, you could be putting yourself in danger." Emily ignored him, pushing past the officers and stumbling toward the perimeter of the clearing. "Lily!" she screamed, her voice raw with emotion. "Lily, answer me!" The officers exchanged concerned glances, but made no further attempt to stop her. They understood her need to do something, anything, in the face of such devastating loss and uncertainty. Emily continued calling as she moved around the periphery of the small lagoon, her voice growing hoarse. The tactical team had completed their initial sweep of the immediate area and found no other signs of recent human presence beyond the disturbed grave and dock. As Emily approached the dilapidated shed they had cleared earlier, her throat raw from calling for Lily, she noticed something odd that had escaped her initial observation. Among the weathered grey boards that formed the shed's walls and door, one plank stood out, fresher wood, nailed across the door at about waist height. The contrast was subtle, but to Emily's desperate, searching eyes it was as obvious as a neon sign. This newer board had been added recently, incongruous with the decades-old wood surrounding it. Emily approached slowly, her heart pounding against her ribs. "Lily?" she called again, this time directing her voice specifically toward the small structure. "Lily, are you in there, sweetheart?" The silence that followed felt different somehow, charged with potential rather than empty. Emily held her breath, listening with every fibre of her being. A small rustling sound came from inside the shed, so faint she might have imagined it. "Lily?" she called once more, her voice gentler now, coaxing rather than demanding. "It's Mommy, baby. I'm here to take you home. It's safe now." The shed door moved slightly, the fresh board shifting against the rusted nails, holding it in place. With trembling hands, Emily gripped the newer plank and pulled, the nails creaking as they reluctantly released their hold on the weathered wood. The door swung inward on protesting hinges, revealing darkness within. For a long, heart-stopping moment, Emily saw nothing in the gloomy interior. Then a small movement caught her eye, a shifting shadow in the darkest corner, behind what appeared to be stacked fishing equipment. Emily remained in the doorway, silhouetted against the light, afraid to move forward and potentially frighten whatever, was hidden inside. "Lily?" she whispered, her voice trembling with hope and fear. "It's Mom." A small figure emerged slowly from the shadows, dirty, disheveled, but wonderfully, miraculously alive. Lily stepped into the shaft of sunlight that penetrated the open doorway, blinking rapidly as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. For a suspended moment, mother and daughter stared at each other across the threshold, Emily taking in Lily's mud-streaked face, tangled brown hair, and torn clothing. Lily gazing at her mother as if she were an apparition that might disappear if approached too quickly. Then the spell broke. Emily dropped to her knees, opening her arms wide as Lily rushed forward with a sobbing cry, nearly knocking her backward with the force of her embrace. They clung to each other, both dissolving into tears as Emily ran her hands over her daughter's face, arms, legs, checking for injuries while repeating, "Thank you," and "My baby," like alternating choruses of a prayer. Officers rushed forward at the commotion, weapons ready, only to pull up short at the sight of the reunion. Rodriguez barked orders to establish a protective perimeter around Emily and Lily, while calling for the medical team. Lily clung to her mother, her small body trembling violently, fingers clutching Emily's shirt, as if afraid she might be torn away at any moment. "I knew you'd find me," Lily whispered between sobs, her voice hoarse from dehydration and fear. "Daddy said to wait until it was safe, and then you'd come." Emily's heart contracted painfully at the mention of Mark, but she forced herself to focus on Lily's immediate needs. Her daughter was alive, impossibly, miraculously alive. Everything else could wait. Officers formed a protective circle around Emily and Lily as Rodriguez knelt beside them, his stern face softening as he addressed the child. "Hey there," he said gently. "You must be Lily." "I'm Officer Rodriguez. You've been very brave." Lily regarded him with caution, maintaining her grip on her mother's shirt. Emily continued running her hands over Lily's arms and legs, checking for injuries. Besides numerous scratches, an impressive collection of mosquito bites and signs of exhaustion, Lily appeared physically unharmed. Her pink t-shirt with the fish design was torn at one sleeve and covered in mud stains, but still recognizable beneath the grime. "The paramedics will be here soon to check you over," Rodriguez explained, his voice gentler than Emily had heard before. "But while we wait, do you feel strong enough to tell us what happened? It might help us catch the bad people who did this." Emily nodded encouragingly, though her heart ached at asking her child to relive the trauma. "It's okay, sweetheart. You can tell Officer Rodriguez what happened." Lily took a deep breath, her small chest rising and falling. "We were fishing," she began, her voice emerging as a whisper before gaining strength. "Dad and I caught 3 fish already. We were going to bring them home for dinner." She paused, her eyes growing distant with the memory. Dad wanted to try a new spot he heard about from a man at the bait shop. He said it would be an adventure. The tactical team had expanded their search perimeter, methodically checking the surrounding area for any additional evidence or threats. Emily noticed them photographing footprints and marking evidence with small yellow tags, but kept her focus on Lily, who was gathering courage to continue. "We were in a really narrow channel," Lily continued, her voice slightly stronger. "Dad was using the motor really quiet-like because he said it wouldn't be good to scare the fish." Her small hands twisted the water bottle nervously. "Dad, Then Dad suddenly got really still and quiet. I asked what was wrong, but he just shushed me. Lily's body began to tremble again as she approached the most difficult part of her story. Emily tightened her arm around her daughter's shoulders, providing silent support. Dad whispered that there were men ahead on a dock we couldn't see yet. He tried to turn the boat around really quiet, but somebody saw us and shouted. Then... Her voice broke, tears streaming down her dirt-streaked face. Then they started shooting at us. Rodriguez nodded encouragingly, his expression neutral despite the gravity of Lily's account. "Take your time," he said gently. "You're doing great." Lily wiped her tears with the back of her hand, leaving a muddy streak across her cheek. The boat motor got hit and stopped working. Dad used the paddle to get us to a little hidden spot, and then he told me to run to the shed we'd passed earlier. He said to hide inside and not come out no matter what I heard, not until I was absolutely certain it was safe. Fresh tears welled in her eyes. He promised he would lead the bad men away from me and then come back when it was safe. Emily's heart ached, with both pride in Mark's bravery and grief at the terrible choice he had faced, knowing he couldn't outrun armed men with Lily, choosing instead to draw them away from her hiding place at the cost of his own life. "I did exactly what he said." Lily looked up at her mother, hope mixed with fear in her eyes. "Did they find Daddy yet? Is he okay?" Her small fingers gripped Emily's hand with surprising strength, seeking reassurance Emily couldn't provide. Emily couldn't bring herself to answer, kissing Lily's forehead instead. Lily seemed to read something in her mother's expression, but continued her story as if delaying the answer she feared most. "I stayed hidden in the shed all night," she said. "I was so scared. It got really dark and there were noises everywhere." She shivered at the memory. "Later I heard boats coming back and men talking in that same language." Rodriguez nodded, making brief notes. "Did you see their faces? Would you recognize any of them?" Lily shook her head. "It was too dark. I just saw shadows moving around with flashlights." She took another sip of water before continuing. "After they left, I waited all night. I was really hungry and thirsty, but I remembered what Dad said about not coming out until it was absolutely safe." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "This morning, when I heard boats coming again, I got really scared. I thought the bad men were back. I pushed a big crate against the door and hid behind some old fishing stuff. I stayed really quiet, just like Dad told me to." She looked at Emily, a tiny smile breaking through her tear-stained face. "But then I heard your voice, Mum. You were calling my name, and I knew it was really you because nobody else sounds exactly like my mum." A lump formed in Emily's throat, making speech impossible. She pulled Lily closer, feeling her daughter's heart beating against her side, the precious life Mark had valued above his own. Lily pulled back slightly, her eyes scanning the officers and activity around them. "Where's Dad?" she asked again, her voice small but insistent. "Is he still leading the bad men away? He promised he'd come back when it was safe." A heavy silence fell over the group. Several officers turned away, busying themselves with equipment. Rodriguez looked at Emily with silent question in his eyes, asking permission. Emily nodded almost imperceptibly, knowing she couldn't find the words herself. Rodriguez knelt down in front of Lily, meeting her gaze directly. His weathered face softened, his official demeanor melting away to reveal profound compassion. "Lily," he began gently, his voice lower and kinder than Emily had heard before, "your daddy was the bravest man I've ever heard of. He did the most important thing a father could do. He protected you. He saved you." Rodriguez paused, resting a steady hand on Lily's small shoulder. "The bad men, they hurt your daddy. He didn't make it. He's gone. But what he did for you was the most courageous thing in the world. He made sure you were safe, even when he knew he was in danger." Lily stared at Rodriguez, her expression uncomprehending at first, then slowly crumpling as understanding dawned. Her blue eyes, so like Mark's, widened in disbelief. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "He promised he'd come back. He promised—" Her face collapsed as the truth penetrated her last defenses. A keening wail rose from her small body, the sound of pure grief tearing through the hushed clearing. Emily pulled her daughter tight against her chest, her own tears falling freely into Lily's tangled hair. They rocked together, sharing their devastating loss while Rodriguez stepped back, giving them privacy in their grief. The other officers turned away respectfully, some wiping their eyes discreetly, others busying themselves with equipment. The forensic team continued their grim work in the background, but with heightened gentleness, aware of the child whose father they were processing as evidence. Through her tears, Emily found herself whispering to Lily about Mark's bravery, about how much he loved her, about how he would always be with them, even if they couldn't see him. The words came without conscious thought, emerging from some deep maternal instinct to ease her child's suffering, even while drowning in her own grief. "He saved you," Emily whispered, stroking Lily's hair. "He loved you so much that he made sure you would be safe no matter what." Lily's sobs gradually quieted, exhaustion overtaking even grief. Her body grew heavy against Emily's as the adrenaline that had sustained her for nearly 24 hours finally ebbed away. "Is he in heaven?" Lily asked in a small voice, her head resting against Emily's shoulder. Emily had never been particularly religious, but in this moment, the answer came without hesitation. "Yes, sweetheart, he's in heaven watching over us." Lily nodded against her mother's chest, accepting this comfort in her exhaustion. "He was really brave, wasn't he?" she murmured, her voice fading as fatigue claimed her. "The bravest," Emily confirmed, kissing the top of Lily's head as her daughter's breathing slowed towards sleep. "Just like you." As Lily drifted into exhausted slumber in her arms, Emily looked up to find Rodriguez watching them, respect and sorrow evident in his expression. He approached quietly, crouching beside them. "The medical team is here," he said softly, nodding toward a boat approaching the shoreline. "They'll want to check her over, make sure she's not dehydrated or injured. Then we can get you both back to the mainland." Emily nodded, grateful for his kindness but unable to form words. Rodriguez seemed to understand. "Mrs. Whitaker," he added, his voice still low to avoid waking Lily, "I've been doing this job for 17 years. What your husband did—" He paused, emotion briefly overtaking his professional demeanor. "I've never seen greater courage. He saved your daughter's life, and his actions will help us dismantle a major drug trafficking operation. He's a hero in every sense of the word." Emily closed her eyes briefly, tears slipping past her lashes. "Thank you," she whispered, the words entirely inadequate for the strange comfort his recognition provided. In the midst of overwhelming loss, knowing that Mark's final act of love would be remembered and honored, offered a tiny handhold in the sheer cliff face of grief she now faced. As the medical team approached with a stretcher and equipment, Emily held Lily's sleeping form a moment longer, drawing strength from her daughter's steady breathing. They had survived, and for now, that would have to be enough. The journey back through the maze of waterways felt surreal to Emily. She sat in the medical transport boat with Lily curled against her side beneath an emergency blanket, both physically and emotionally exhausted. The paramedics had examined Lily thoroughly, confirming that beyond dehydration, insect bites and minor scratches, she was physically unharmed. They had inserted a small IV to provide fluids, the clear tubing looking impossibly fragile against Lily's mud-streaked arm. Lily hadn't spoken since learning about her father, her small body occasionally shuddering with silent sobs even in sleep. Emily stroked her daughter's tangled hair, trying to comprehend how a simple fishing trip had transformed into a nightmare that ended with Mark's death and Lily's traumatic ordeal. Just 36 hours ago, they had been an ordinary family facing ordinary problems, bills, job searching, the everyday friction of marriage. Now those problems seemed trivial beyond measure. The Everglades continued their timeless rhythms, indifferent to the human tragedy that had unfolded in their midst. Emily gazed across the water, her mind replaying Rodriguez's words about Mark's bravery. The enormity of his sacrifice overwhelmed her. How in those terrifying moments his only thought had been to save their daughter. He had known, Emily realized, the moment he directed Lily to hide in the shed, that he likely wouldn't survive. Yet he had made that choice without hesitation, drawing the danger away from his child with his final conscious acts. The man she had suspected of abandoning them had instead given his life for them. The regret was crushing, that her last words to him had been in anger, that she had harbored suspicions while he died a hero's death. She would live with that regret forever, carrying it alongside her grief like twin burdens. The boat rounded a final bend, the main channel coming into view with its broader expanse of open water. In the distance, Emily could see vehicles with flashing lights gathered at the ranger station. Police, medical services, and what appeared to be news vans. Reality waited beyond this cocoon of water and wilderness, statements to give, arrangements to make, a life to somehow rebuild from shattered pieces. The road ahead stretched before her, like an unmarked path through darkness. A traumatized child who would need specialized help processing what she had witnessed, funeral arrangements to make, financial concerns more pressing than ever, and her own grief that felt as boundless as the Everglades themselves. Emily knew there would be days when the weight of it all might seem impossible to bear, yet amid the crushing pain, a certainty formed within her. Mark's final act of love would be their guiding light forward. With each difficult decision she'd face, each moment Lily needed strength she didn't feel she had, the memory of what Mark did would show them the way. She pulled Lily closer, feeling the girl's heartbeat against her side, the precious life Mark had valued above his own. As the boat approached the dock where their journey had begun just yesterday morning, Emily made a silent promise to her husband. His sacrifice would not just be something they survived, but something they honored by truly living. She would make sure Lily grew up knowing her father was a hero in the truest sense of the word, not because he died, but because of how deeply he loved.